The year 1453. The 21-year-old Sultan of the Ottoman Empire, Mehmed II, orders the construction of a cannon the world has never seen. 8 meters of bronze, cannonballs weighing 600 kilograms. To haul this monster to the walls of Constantinople, 60 oxen and 200 men are harnessed. The caravan stretches for kilometers. Soon, this cannon will shatter walls that had stood for 1,000 years and survived 23 sieges. But the city must also be cut off from the sea. The entrance to the bay is blocked by a massive iron chain. The fleet cannot pass. So the Sultan orders ships to be dragged over land. 70 ships are pulled ashore, placed on wooden sledges, and hauled across the hills. In the morning, the defenders awaken to the impossible. The enemy fleet stands where it cannot be. The city is completely surrounded, both by land and by water. 100,000 warriors against 7,000 defenders of Constantinople. The Emperor of Constantinople sends envoys across all of Europe, begging for help. Help will not come. The siege will last 53 days, fighting on land, on water, and in underground tunnels. Cannons of various calibers will fire without pause. On May 29th, Constantinople will fall, a capital that had stood for 1,100 years. With it will die the last fragment of the Roman Empire. Its final emperor will cast off the purple and, in the chainmail of an ordinary soldier, charge into the thick of battle. His body will never be conclusively identified. To understand what happened in 53, we must turn back the clock. The Byzantine Empire, the direct heir of Rome, once controlled the entire eastern Mediterranean. But centuries of war tore province after province away. The Seljuk Turks seized almost all of Anatolia, the heart of the empire. The Serbs and Bulgarians bit off the Balkans. Venice and Genoa seized islands and trading ports. And in 1204, the unthinkable happened. Constantinople fell for the first time. Not to Muslims, but to fellow Christians. The Fourth Crusade, which was meant to liberate Jerusalem, instead descended upon the greatest Christian city in the world. The Crusaders looted Constantinople for 3 days. A city that no enemy had taken for 800 years was ravaged by those considered allies. They plundered churches, melted down bronze statues that had stood since antiquity, tore apart libraries preserving the works of Plato and Aristotle. For amusement, they placed a prostitute on the patriarchal throne. 60 years later, the Greeks retook the city, but the empire never recovered. The treasury was looted, the fleet destroyed. Trade passed into Italian hands. By the mid-15th century, the empire was essentially reduced to Constantinople alone. Its population, once 500,000 to 800,000, had shrunk to 50,000. Entire districts stood empty. The walls, built 1,000 years earlier, had decayed in places. The treasury was empty. On the other side of the Bosphorus, a young Mehmed was rising in power, obsessed since childhood with a single goal: to take Constantinople. From an early age, his tutors instilled in him that this was his Islamic duty. His father, Murad II, was a powerful sultan, but a man weary of power. Twice he abdicated the throne in favor of his young son, and twice he returned because the boy could not cope. The first time, Mehmed was 12. He was placed on the throne, and the court immediately descended into chaos. Viziers schemed, janissaries rebelled, uprisings broke out in the Balkans. Murad returned and silently took power back. For a 12-year-old boy, it was a humiliation he would remember for life. Mehmed was not just a warrior. He spoke 6 languages: Turkish, Arabic, Persian, Greek, Latin, and Slavic. He read Homer and Caesar. He admired Alexander the Great and dreamed of surpassing him. But at court, he was seen as a bookish boy, not a commander. When Murad died, Mehmed was 19. European diplomats wrote home, "The young sultan is weak and inexperienced. There is no danger." It was a fatal mistake. The quiet youth with books turned out to be a steel strategist with a single aim, to prove them all wrong. According to the Hadith, the Prophet Muhammad said, "You will surely conquer Constantinople. What a wonderful commander, and what a wonderful army that will be." Mehmed dreamed of becoming that commander, and there could be only one proof: Constantinople. Preparation began in 1452. Mehmed ordered the construction of the fortress Rumeli Hisar on the European shore of the Bosphorus, directly opposite the older Anadolu Hisar. The two fortresses gripped the strait like a vice. Any ship sailing to Constantinople from the Black Sea was now under fire. Construction took just 4 months. It was a signal impossible to ignore. But Mehmed's main weapon was the cannon. The Hungarian engineer Urban first offered his services to Constantine, but the emperor had no money. Urban then turned to Mehmed, who gave him everything: money, resources, a workshop. The result was the basilica, a giant bombard more than 8 meters long. It fired stone balls weighing about 600 kilograms. Nothing like it had ever been seen. Each shot was crafted individually. Preparing a single shot took about 3 hours. To transport the basilica to the walls of Constantinople required 60 oxen and 200 men. The caravan stretched for kilometers. Mehmed assembled an army Europe had not seen since the Roman Empire: 100,000 warriors, janissaries, the elite guard trained to kill from childhood, Sipahi cavalry, azaps, light infantry, artillerymen, sappers, a fleet of more than 100 ships. Constantine had no intention of surrendering without a fight. Constantinople stood on a triangular peninsula. 3 sides, 3 lines of walls. To the west, the land walls of Theodosius, 6.5 kilometers long. To the south, the sea walls along the Sea of Marmara, about 8 kilometers. To the north, the sea walls along the Golden Horn, about 5 kilometers. In total, nearly 20 kilometers of perimeter. The Theodosian walls were the greatest fortification of the ancient world. 3 lines of defense, a moat 20 meters wide, an outer wall 8 meters high, and behind it, an inner wall 12 meters high with towers every 50 to 60 meters. For over 1,000 years, these walls had withstood everything: Avars, Arabs, Bulgarians, Rus. 23 sieges, and not a single breach through the land walls. But the walls had decayed. The moat, neglected for decades, was clogged with debris, shallow in places. Constantine organized a massive cleanup. Thousands of citizens, from aristocrats to beggars, took to the walls. There was no money. Constantine made a decision that in peacetime would have sparked revolt: the confiscation of church silver. Golden and silver vessels, icon covers, all were melted into coins. With them, they hired mercenaries, bought weapons, paid for repairs. The forges worked around the clock. Greek fire, the legendary incendiary mixture that burned even on water, was prepared in limited quantities. By then, the recipe was almost lost, but remnants of supplies were found. Thousands of sacks of earth were stockpiled to fill the breaches in the walls that would inevitably appear. Wooden palisades, barrels for barricades, everything stood stacked along the walls. Constantine sent envoys to every capital in Europe. The replies were polite and empty. The only real help came from volunteers. Giovanni Giustiniani Longo, the best expert in fortress defense in all of Europe, brought 700 Genoese. Catalans followed, Venetian sailors who refused to leave the city, a handful of papal soldiers, a Scottish engineer, even a Turkish prince, Mehmed's personal enemy. Together, about 2,000 men. With the rest of the city's defenders, there were only about 7,000. By March 1453, preparations were complete. The walls patched, the moats cleared, supplies gathered, the chain across the Golden Horn raised. The entrance to the bay was blocked by a massive iron chain stretching from Constantinople to Galata, each link as thick as a man's arm. The chain lay on wooden pontoons and could stop any ship. Giustiniani took position at the most vulnerable section of the land walls, in the valley of the Lycus River, where the walls ran through low ground. This place would be called the Mesotachion. It was here that Mehmed aimed the basilica. At the beginning of April, the 100,000-strong Ottoman army reached the walls. From the ramparts, the defenders saw what they had feared: tents stretching to the horizon, thousands of banners, the gleam of weapons, and cannons none of them had ever seen before. The army spread along the entire land wall, from the Sea of Marmara to the Golden Horn. On April 6th, Mehmed demanded the city's surrender. Constantine refused. That same day, the cannons began to thunder. The guns were only a prelude. In the very first days, Mehmed sent infantry against the walls to test the defences. Waves of Azaps, light infantry, ran toward the walls with ladders. The first obstacle was the moat. 20 meters wide, once filled with water, but by 1453 it was in varying condition. In some places, water stood waist deep. In others, it was a swampy sludge, and in some, it had nearly dried up. The Azaps rushed forward with fascines, bundles of brushwood, and sacks of earth, throwing them into the moat so that those behind could cross. Those who reached the base of the wall pressed themselves against the stone, trying to find a dead zone where arrows could not reach. From above came a storm of arrows, stones, boiling water, and burning pitch. Some tried to climb ladders. They were thrown down with hooks along with the men. The first assaults collapsed. The basilica and other bombards continued their methodical bombardment of the walls. The roar was heard for kilometers. The great gun could fire only 7 times a day, but each shot was devastating. The walls cracked, crumbled, turned into piles of stone. Under cover of darkness, the garrison of Constantinople went out to the breaches and repaired them. Wooden palisades as a frame, barrels filled with earth as mass, and over them they hung sacks of wool. A soft barrier that absorbed the impact of cannonballs instead of shattering like stone. By morning, the breaches were sealed. Mehmed flew into a rage. The bombardment continued for weeks. The basilica fired only a few times a day, but each blast could be heard for miles. It crushed morale. Resistance against such a weapon seemed pointless. Alongside it, dozens of smaller guns battered the walls, and they inflicted most of the damage. The bronze barrel of the basilica began to crack almost immediately. It was repaired, reinforced, and fired again. Urban, the creator of the cannons, was killed when one of his guns burst during firing. On April 20th, the center of the battle shifted to the water. One of the most incredible naval battles of the era took place. 4 Genoese carracks and 1 Byzantine grain transport were sailing toward Constantinople from the south. As they approached, they were met by the entire Ottoman fleet, more than 100 galleys, 100 against 5. But the Genoese carracks were high-sided, heavy ships. The Ottoman galleys were low and maneuverable, but could not reach the height of the carracks' decks. The Genoese fired downward as if from fortress walls. Mehmed watched the battle from the shore and lost himself to rage. According to chroniclers, he rode his horse into the water, shouting orders to sailors who could not hear him. At one point, the wind died. The sails hung limp. The 5 ships lay motionless, surrounded by dozens of galleys. The Ottomans boarded. The fight turned into hand-to-hand combat on the decks. The Genoese cut boarding hooks, threw Turks into the water, and drenched enemy decks with Greek fire. Then the wind returned. The sails filled. The heavy carracks surged forward, crushing the oars of the galleys. All 5 ships broke through to the entrance of the Golden Horn. A mechanism in a tower on the Constantinople side could open the passage in 20 seconds. The ships entered the harbour, and the chain closed again before the bows of the Ottoman galleys. The grain was delivered. Inside the city, jubilation. People wept, embraced. It seemed a miracle was possible. Admiral Baltaoglu was summoned before Mehmed. The Sultan wanted him executed. Fleet officers fell to their knees. They testified that the admiral had fought bravely and had been wounded in the eye. Mehmed spared his life, but ordered him to be publicly flogged and stripped of all property. For Mehmed, this was a moment of crisis. The Grand Vizier Halil Pasha, secretly receiving gold from the Byzantines, increased the pressure. Abandon the city, Sultan. Europe will send a fleet to aid Byzantium. Mehmed convened a war council. For the first time, voices called for retreat. The young Sultan listened to everyone. Then he rose and said, "Either I will take the city, or the city will take me." And then Mehmed did what would go down in history as one of the most audacious military operations of all time. If the ships could not enter the Golden Horn through the chain, they would go over land. Mehmed's engineers built a road about 3 kilometers long, from the shore of the Bosphorus across the hills behind Genoese Galata and down to the waters of the Golden Horn. A leveled path, wooden rails, heavily greased with animal fat. On the night of April 22nd, about 70 ships were hauled ashore, placed on sledges, and pulled along the rails over the hills. Each ship was dragged by dozens of oxen and hundreds of soldiers. On some, sails were raised to let the wind help them uphill. Drummers on deck beat rhythm as if rowing. All this happened right behind the walls of Galata, the Genoese colony, formerly neutral. Thousands of men, oxen, torches, the thunder of movement. The Genoese could not have failed to see it. But Galata did not inform Constantine of the fleet's transfer. By day, Genoese merchants traded with the Ottomans. By night, individual Genoese secretly crossed into Constantinople to fight on the walls. Galata wanted to remain on the side of the victor and secretly aided both sides. In the morning, the defenders of Constantinople woke to the impossible. Dozens of Ottoman ships stood in the waters of the Golden Horn, behind the chain, at their backs, where they could not be. Now the city was completely encircled. The sea walls along the Golden Horn, thinner, lower, less fortified, suddenly became the front line. The defensive perimeter nearly doubled. Mehmed immediately began building a pontoon bridge across the Golden Horn. Now he could attack from any direction. Constantine organized a night counterattack with fireships, vessels packed with combustibles. But someone passed the information to the Turks. The fireships were met with cannon fire. The attack failed. Captured sailors were executed in full view of the walls. The Byzantines responded by executing captured Turks. Mehmed attacked underground as well. Serbian sappers, the best miners of the Balkans, dug tunnels beneath the walls to collapse the foundations. The defenders of Constantinople placed copper bowls filled with water in underground chambers, watching the ripples on the surface to determine the direction of tunneling. Then they dug counter-tunnels. Beneath the city, a real underground war unfolded. The defenders flooded tunnels, filled them with smoke, collapsed their ceilings. At times, It came to hand-to-hand combat in total darkness, in tunnels where one could not stand upright. The fighting underground was a nightmare. The tunnels were so narrow that men fought on their knees, with daggers, short axes, bare hands. Torches went out from lack of air, and men cut each other in complete darkness. The garrison used every defensive measure, pouring water into Turkish tunnels, pumping in choking smoke from burning sulfur and wet straw, collapsing ceilings onto the sappers' heads. Not a single tunnel reached the walls. On May 21st, Mehmed sent Constantine a final offer: surrender the city and withdraw to the Peloponnese. Live, rule, just give up the walls. Constantine replied, "To surrender the city is not in my power, nor in that of any other, for we have all resolved to die of our own free will and will not spare our lives." These were the words of an emperor. But he would not be the only one to die. Behind the walls lived ordinary people, 50,000 souls, trapped in a dying city. Food was running out, grain reserves were dwindling, the price of bread soared. People ate whatever they could find. The city lived on rumors. "The Venetian fleet is already on its way," some said. "We've been abandoned. No help is coming," others whispered. And help truly was not coming. The Venetian Senate debated for months whether to send a fleet. The decision was made, but agonizingly, criminally late. In the final weeks, omens came one after another. On May 22nd, during a religious procession, an icon of the Virgin fell from its litter, straight into the mud. The next day, the city was covered in a thick, unnatural fog, an unheard of phenomenon for May. But the most frightening thing happened on May 24th. At night, a strange glow appeared above the dome of Hagia Sophia, a reddish, pulsing light seen by both sides. Modern historians believe it may have been a rare atmospheric phenomenon. During strong electrical tension in the air, a faint shimmering light can sometimes appear on sharp objects, mast tops, spires, domes. Sailors had seen it for centuries and called it St. Elmo's fire. The dome of Hagia Sophia, crowned with a cross, was a perfect point for such a discharge. But for the Byzantines, there was only one explanation. The Holy Spirit was leaving the cathedral, leaving the city. Mehmed, however, saw the glow as a sign. God was handing the city to him. In the final days of the siege, the streets emptied. Those not on the walls prayed in churches. Mothers held their children close. Old men sat at the thresholds of the homes they had lived in all their lives, waiting for the end. On May 27th, Mehmed began a psychological assault. At nightfall, he ordered every fire, every torch in the camp to be lit. The Ottoman army roared. Drums, zurnas, war horns. A wall of sound crashed over the city. Tens of thousands of voices merged into a single, continuous roar. This lasted all night. On May 28th, Mehmed declared a day of rest. For the first time in 7 weeks, the cannons fell silent. The silence after the endless thunder was deafening. That evening, Constantine gathered his companions for a final supper. Chroniclers compared it to the Last Supper. He addressed each man personally, thanked them, asked forgiveness, reminded them that they were descendants of Greeks and Romans, that their ancestors had stopped Persians and Arabs, that the walls of Constantinople had never been taken by a land assault. In Hagia Sophia, the final Christian liturgy was held. Orthodox and Catholics prayed together. Constantine took communion. Then came the final inspection. Constantine mounted his horse and rode along the entire line of walls, from the Golden Horn to the Sea of Marmara. 6.5 kilometers. Every post, every tower. He stopped, dismounted, spoke with the men, called those he knew by name. Where foreigners stood, he spoke in their languages. At 1 in the morning on May 29th, Mehmed threw everything forward. The assault came in 3 waves. First came the Bashi bazooks, irregular troops, adventurers, criminals, volunteers drawn by the promise of plunder, poorly armed, undisciplined. Mehmed knew they would not break the walls. Their task was to exhaust the defenders. Behind them stood blocking detachments with orders to cut down anyone who tried to flee. For 2 hours, the Bashi bazooks battered the walls. From above, the defenders fired arrows, poured down everything that burned. Those who reached the walls with ladders climbed and were pushed down with poles, scalded with boiling water, struck in the face with stones. The moat filled with bodies. When the wave was spent, Mehmed coldly signaled the second. The second wave was the Anatolian infantry, professional soldiers in heavy armor. They struck at the Mesotachion. At one point, about 300 men broke through the outer wall. For a few minutes, it seemed the end had come. But Giustiniani personally led a counterattack. The Genoese and Greeks drove the attackers back. By 4 in the morning, both waves had been repelled. 5 hours of continuous fighting. Hands could no longer hold swords. There was no one to carry away the wounded. Women brought water and stones to the walls. Constantine moved along the line, speaking to the men, lifting the wounded. At dawn, the Janissaries advanced. 12,000 of the empire's best warriors, taken as children from Christian families in the Balkans, raised as fanatical Muslims. They did not move like the previous waves. They moved in silence. No battle cries, no roar, only the rhythmic tread of thousands of feet and the steady beat of drums. And then 2 events occurred that decided the fate of the city. First, Giustiniani was gravely wounded. Bleeding heavily, he asked to be carried away. Constantine pleaded, "For the love of God, do not leave us." But Giustiniani could no longer stand. When the Genoese saw their commander leave the wall, panic spread along that sector. He was carried to a ship. The vessel departed while the city still fought. A few days later, Giustiniani died on the island of Chios, the man who almost saved Constantinople. Second, someone discovered that a small postern gate in the wall, the Kirka Porta, had been left unlocked. A tiny door used for night sorties. Betrayal? Fatigue? Chaos? We will never know. About 50 Janissaries slipped through, got behind the defenders, and raised the Ottoman flag on a tower of the inner wall. When the flag rose above the tower, the line of defense collapsed. The Genoese, without Giustiniani, ran to their ships. The Greek militia fled. The Janissaries flooded into the city from all directions at once. Constantine stayed. His companions begged him to board a ship. It was still possible to escape. Constantine said, "God forbid that I live as an emperor without an empire. When the city falls, I will fall with it." He tore off his imperial regalia, purple, eagles, so he could not be recognized. Beneath the purple was ordinary chainmail. The last Roman emperor became an anonymous soldier and threw himself into hand-to-hand combat at the gates. According to one version, he died fighting, cut down by Janissaries who did not know whom they had killed. According to another, he was trampled in the crush at the gates. Mehmed ordered the body found. A head, presumably the emperor's, was brought to him. He displayed it, then ordered it buried with honors. There was no certain identification. But for the Greek people, Constantine did not die. The legend of the marble emperor was born. An angel turned Constantine to stone and hid him beneath the Golden Gate. He sleeps and waits. When the time comes, the angel will return and place a sword in his hand. That is why the Ottomans sealed the Golden Gate, and it remains closed to this day. While the battle raged on the walls, thousands of civilians, old men, women with children, the wounded, nuns, rushed to Hagia Sophia and locked the bronze doors from the inside. Among them lived a prophecy. When the enemy reached the column of Justinian, an angel would descend from heaven and drive them away. For 1,000 years, Hagia Sophia had been the largest church in the Christian world. The height to the dome, 55 meters. By morning, the cathedral was filled with people. Priests conducted the liturgy without stopping. Outside, the cries and thunder drew closer. Then the doors gave way. The janissaries broke in through the main entrance. People screamed. Some ran toward the altar. According to legend, the priests continued the service until the very last moment. Those inside became spoils of war. Aristocrats were selected for ransom. The rest, sent to the slave market. Families were torn apart. The chronicler Ducas wrote that endless lines of people were led out of Hagia Sophia, and the Venetian fleet, which the city had hoped for so desperately, was in the Aegean Sea when the news arrived. Constantinople had fallen. The fleet turned back. The help awaited for 53 days never came. When Mehmed entered Hagia Sophia, he saw a soldier breaking marble from the floor and struck him with his sword. "You have been given the people and the spoils. The buildings belong to me." He stood for a long time beneath the dome, looking upward. He scattered earth over his turban as a sign of humility. He ordered the muezzin to be called. The first adhan sounded beneath the dome of Hagia Sophia. Minarets were later added. The mosaics were covered with plaster. For 3 days, the looting continued. Then Mehmed stopped the destruction. He needed a living city, not ruins. Mehmed issued a decree of resettlement, moving people from across the empire: Turks, Greeks, Armenians, Jews. Each community received its own quarter, its own church or synagogue. The Greek patriarch was granted authority over the Orthodox community. Within 20 years, Istanbul again became a cosmopolitan metropolis. The fall of Constantinople shook Europe. Thousands of Greek scholars fled west with ancient manuscripts. They became a catalyst for the Renaissance. Europe, having lost overland routes to the east, began seeking sea routes. Within decades, Columbus would sail across the Atlantic. Mehmed's cannons changed warfare forever. Before 1453, it was believed that a well-fortified city could be held indefinitely. After Constantinople, it became clear no stone wall was impregnable. The age of gunpowder had begun. And Constantinople became Istanbul, the capital of the Ottoman Empire for nearly 500 years. Mehmed the Conqueror, Fatih, turned it into one of the greatest cities in the world. Today, if you visit Istanbul, you can still walk along the Theodosian walls. Over the next 30 years, Mehmed conquered Greece, Serbia, Bosnia, Albania, Crimea, and even landed in Italy, capturing the city of Otranto. The Pope prepared to flee Rome. Mehmed died in 1481. According to some versions, he was poisoned. He was 49. He was preparing a campaign against Rome. Had he lived another 5 years, the map of Europe might have looked very different. If you enjoyed the video, support it with a like and a subscription.